I promise this is a true story. No one seems to believe me, but I can't explain it otherwise. I was out camping in the mountains when I was about 11 years old. It was this small, open area deep in the forest surrounded by trees. It was a family trip that included my sister, parents, grandparents, cousins, and a few friends and their parents. So it was 2 tents and 1 RV. My family slept in one tent that had a side connected to the tent that my dog slept in, with a toilet tent nearby. My friends and their parents had a tent behind ours, and then my grandparents and my cousins slept in the RV. There were 12 of us total, including myself. Other than us, there was only one other RV that also had a dog, and another tent with a couple a few rows down. It was a fairly big campsite, so there was a lot of distance between us, and my family was the closest to the woods. Not so close that we could see into it, but close enough that we could see about 5 feet past the tree line. It was a 2-week trip, and we had 5 days left before going home. It was about 3 a.m., and I was still awake. I had forgotten my insomnia medicine at home and had slept till 2 that afternoon. I had to use the bathroom, but was too scared to go out alone, so I woke my dad up. He didn't want to leave the tent, but he promised to watch from the windows until I came back inside. So I grabbed a lamp, and then I went outside to the toilet tent. Once inside, I closed myself in and turned off the lamp, a habit I have so that bugs aren't attached to the lamp inside the tent, and so that nobody could see me in there. It wasn't even a minute later, and the dogs that were in the tent next to the bathroom started barking and growling like nuts. Now these 2 never barked or growled except when somebody came close to the tent, or that one time geese were passing between the tents and it scared them. And it was late also, so I couldn't even hear anyone outside. My dad started yelling for them to shut up, but they just got louder, and our golden retriever, who couldn't even hurt a fly by the way, started to bark this scary bark. Our other dog was growling like he was about to attack something. It was scary to hear. I was scared, but I just wanted to know if there was something outside that I needed to yell to my dad about. So I opened up the entrance just slightly to see what was out there. I looked straight out into the woods, trying to see if it was another animal, but I couldn't see anything. But then, to the left of where I was looking, something moved behind the trees. Once my eyes focused on it, I could see this large figure, much bigger than what a human would be at this distance, walking across the tree line. It wasn't coming into the camp, but it was walking past it. Its arms looked like they were dragging on the ground, and it looked like it had this long snout coming from its face. Its eyes were reflecting the light from the RV across the way, making it glow a scary red color. It also looked like it had these huge antlers on its head, and it moved in almost a smooth way. Smooth is where it looks unnatural, and it was kind of floating. Finally, my dad started shouting for the dogs to shut up and open the side of the tent that connected to the dog's tent. This caused the dogs to run into the main tent. The creature seemed to not react to the commotion, but it did turn to walk back into the woods away from our area. As it moved away, the dogs started calming down and stopped barking and growling, as if nothing even happened. It took me 5 minutes after seeing the dog weaving to feel my heart beating. My dad called to ask if I was okay, and I said yes, and went back inside. But I couldn't sleep at all that night. In the morning during breakfast, I told everyone what I had saw, but no one believed me. My dad said I probably was seeing things from how tired I was, or I was seeing a deer in the dark and just missed how it looked. After breakfast, me and the kids my age, aka all the kids but one cousin, went to the tree line where I saw the creature a few hours before. The area I saw it walking had hoof prints in the dirt and some signs of something dragging. And further into the trees, there was this one tree that had these huge deep lashes in it that was obviously fresh and unnatural. My dad said it was probably a deer rubbing its antlers in the tree, but it obviously wasn't. I refused to use the bathroom at night after that, and I struggled to sleep even more. 2 days later, me and my friends got my dad to go with us further into the tree line. I wanted to see if there were any other signs something had been there. As we walked into the tree line, we showed my dad the marks, but the tracks had faded. My dad said it looked like a coyote had dug its claws into the tree. As we walked deeper and it got darker, my dad told us to wait and stay where we were, and then he continued forward on his own. After 5 minutes, he came back and he said we're going back to camp. After returning, he told us he had found 2 more trees marked the same way as the one we showed him, and a dead fox. He said the strangest thing was the fox wasn't even eaten or anything, but had been marked like the trees, and a large portion of its side had been ripped off and tossed further away. He looked disturbed, but said it was probably a young coyote that got into a fight and ended up leaving it. That was when I knew what I saw was real. After that, I refused to sleep in the tent and slept on the couch in my grandparents' RV for the rest of the trip. We no longer camped in the site after a couple was found dead 3 weeks later. This happened about 2 months ago, and about 2 weeks before that, I had an organized Halloween meetup with my 3 childhood friends at my house, which is pretty isolated. It's far away from the city and near some empty farms. It's been a tradition every year to invite my friends over to camp out in a tent outside my house, but this time I wanted to add some extra excitement. For privacy, I'll call my friends Ray, G, and Adam. Ray was the funny, tall, and average-built one. G was shorter but super chill, the kind of friend you could always relax with. Adam was my best childhood friend. We'd hung out almost every day each summer since we were 10, and we've been in the same class for 6 straight years. They planned to arrive around 2 p.m., and we aimed to head out to our camp area by 4 p.m. Ray and Adam arrived first, so we set up snacks, packed our backpacks, and just joked around like any other friends. We planned to get to the camp area using a couple of dirt bikes. But soon we realized that Adam's bike had a busted clutch cable. We spent a while trying to fix it, but we only made things worse. And by the time G showed up at 3:30, we had to adjust our plan. We decided that I'd take G on the dirt bike, and Adam would ride my other bike, and then Ray would wait back in my house while I made a return trip to pick him up once we got the others set up at the camp. The camp area was about 8 kilometers away, requiring us to cross a quiet highway and then follow a bumpy, gravelly farm road. This camp area wasn't anything official. It was basically just a flat spot in the middle of a field where I like to go chill and clear my thoughts. By the time G and I arrived, it was already getting dark, so I rushed back to get Ray. When we finally all gathered at the spot, G and Adam had already set up the firewood but hadn't lit the fire yet. It was pitch black, and the place felt eerier than usual. We got the fire going and started grilling sausages, enjoying the solitude. The area is always empty, no one ever uses that road. And then out of nowhere, we saw a helicopter fly over us. We laughed nervously, wondering if they'd spotted the fire and thought it was some sort of cult gathering. About 3 minutes later, we saw a car headlights off in the distance, maybe 2 kilometers away. The car seemed to just be sitting there with its lights on, but after a few moments, it turned them off. We thought it was weird, but didn't give it too much thought. Then we noticed a massive tractor, like one of those crop-cutting blades in front, slowly moving through a field about 200 meters away. We didn't think anything of it at first, but then it started heading straight toward us. We quickly moved our bikes and bags out of the way, but the tractor kept getting closer, like it had no intention of stopping. At the last second, I grabbed our helmets and moved them just before the tractor rolled over the fire, extinguishing it. Then it stopped right there, turned off its lights, and just stood still. It was pitch black and we couldn't see inside the cab. We all stood there creeped out, wondering why it would almost run us over and then just stop. The tractor stayed in place for what felt like an eternity. None of us could see a thing inside, and I thought that someone was just sitting there silently watching us. It gave us chills. Finally, I told everyone to pack up as fast as possible. 2 of my friends somehow squeezed onto the back of my dirt bike, and Adam got onto his bike. We sped off with one of my friends clinging on and nervously looking back. He said the tractor was just sitting there in the dark, without its lights on still. After a tense, silent ride, we finally made it back home about 20 minutes later. We tried to brush it off, only mentioning it once, but the whole experience left us shaken. Now thinking back, I can't help but wonder what the driver's intentions were. Why would someone drive so close to us, extinguish our fire, and then just sit there in silence? I keep imagining that while we were staring into that dark cab, maybe the driver had already slipped out of the tractor, silently watching us from behind one of the wheels. The thought still sends chills down my spine. When I was 16, my life had changed forever. I had broken my back in a bad accident and was bedridden for months, unable to move. The pain was excruciating, but the psychological toll was even worse. Being trapped in a hospital bed, staring at the same four walls day after day. But I was determined to recover and get my life back. As soon as the doctors cleared me, I decided I need to get out into nature and truly heal my mind and body. My mom agreed that a camping trip down in the beautiful Devon countryside might just be what I needed. She dropped me off at a remote forested area with my tent, some supplies, and a portable charger to keep my phone powered up. I had scoped out what looked like the perfect isolated spot to set up camp. Sure, it seemed to be on a private land, but it was getting late and I didn't want to risk camping too close to a public area. I quickly pitched a tent as darkness fell, cracked open a cider, and fired up YouTube on my phone as I settled in to relax. That's when things took a turn for the worst. I noticed my phone battery was draining faster than it should, even while charging. Strange, but I tried not to think too much of it. That's when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps tramping through the underbush, rapidly getting closer. My heart pounded. It sounded like at least 30 footfalls. Was it an aggressive hiker? Or worse, a property owner with a shotgun? In a panic, I unzipped the tent and stuck my hands up, preparing to face whoever was out there. But there was nothing, just the eerie silence of the forest. The footsteps that had been nearly on top of me just seconds before simply faded into an unnatural nothingness. A deep sense of dread washed over me in that moment. Something was horribly wrong here. I turned my head slowly, my gut telling me I wasn't alone. And that's when I saw it, barely 20 feet away, unmoving yet undoubtedly alive. A massive skeletal beast around 5 feet tall, vaguely resembling a hairless, emaciated dog. I've never felt such primal terror. Fight or flight didn't even enter into it. I instinctively scrambled backwards into the tent and zipped it up, curling into a tight ball on the floor. My mind had simply shut down, overloaded by the sight of that thing. After who knows how long, I somehow thought to check on my phone in desperation. It was completely drained, so I frantically swapped in the portable charger. And an agonizing 50 minutes crawled by before I turned back on with just 3% battery remaining. With shaking hands, I managed to text my mom a frantic plea for help, dropping my location pin and a prearranged code phrase for an emergency. The phone died again before she could respond. All I could do was hunker down in my sleeping bag and try not to imagine what sort of creature was lurking just outside those thin walls. The next few hours passed like a waking nightmare. Every minor sound, whether it be a snapping twig or rustling bush, sent panicked visions through my mind of that towering, bony creature closing in for the kill. Finally, I heard the blessed rumble of an engine in the distance. Risking a peek outside, I nearly collapsed with the relief at the sight of my mom's car pulling up. I didn't even wait for the code response. I just grabbed my bag and sprinted straight for her open arms, leaving the tent and all my other belongings behind without a second thought. To this day, I have no rational explanation for what I encountered out in those woods. Maybe it was a delirious hallucination or a vivid waking dream brought on by stress and fatigue. All I know is that I've never felt such abject primal terror before, or since. My body was robbed of all of its ability for rational thought or action, and only the most basic instincts for self-preservation remained.